Hi, everybody.
Just did it.
There we go.
Yeah. Thank you, Sila.
Amazing. All right. So, do I take it away? You want to introduce me?
So I want to introduce Jessica Lamb, and Jessica has been supporting the Safe Network even before I got here to the district. I remember attending trainings. Many of us are shaking our head. You're a staple in our community.
Oh, thank you.
I'm always thankful and so appreciative of your availability to us and to our educators. And what a difference you've made for all of us, encouraging us to continue to support our students. And I'm just glad you're here. You're here with us. And Safe School South Florida, a wonderful organization, so many years that you've
Yes.
always been part of.
I
So
have
thank
been,
you for
yes, for
being
a very,
here.
very long time. So, yeah,
Yes.
I've been a part of this community since the 1990s. So,
Mhm.
for all intents and purposes, since before the end of last century. So, it's been before the turn of the century. I've been involved, and actually, I've been
Yes.
involved with this organization since before you were called Safe, and you were the Sexual
Mhm.
Minority Network, and
Yeah, yeah, since the
so
90s, like you said, with
exactly.
Dr. I can't remember her name.
Marilyn Volker.
Marilyn Volker. Oh my
Yes,
goodness. Yes,
yes,
Marilyn Volker.
she's a very dear
Well, thank
friend,
you,
and
Jessica. And I turn it over to you.
all
And we're
right,
here.
so
We'll be
much
checking the chat, everyone.
perfect. I'll be looking at the chat also on my window. So thank you for having me. As she mentioned, I'm Jessica Lamb, and I am here representing Safe Schools South Florida. I'm one of their facilitators of and educators. I also work with the Transgender Certification Association. I'm an educator there. I'm also the vice president because there was a much needed education around transgender subjects. I also was the program coordinator for Pride Lines Youth Services. Some of you may be familiar with Pride Lines Youth Services as a group that supports LGBTQ youth and all their friends and allies. So they provide a safe space for them. And they were the organization back in the day when kids weren't allowed to go to proms with their same sex partners or in the clothing they like to wear. They were the ones who used to do the gay straight alliance, proms that would happen outside of school. So when these kids couldn't go to their own proms, they would go there. And my eyes were opened wide when I started working with them because I worked with a lot of inner city kids struggling with gender identity. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about what is the T in LGBTQ. So I don't have a great deal of time and I have so much of a wealth of information to offer you. I put my information in the chat window there and I'm going to put it again. If you want to reach out to me directly at any point, if you need any advice or consultation, or if you just want me to come and present what I'm presenting here to the students, as I've done many times, at the GSAs and such. I've been invited to come and talk. I'm more than happy to do that. I am an ally to this community. So let's just go ahead and kick it right off over here. So, we're looking at this community of individuals who are striving for respect and affirmation. So, every human in this world wants to have respect and affirmation from those people. And I say affirmation because affirmation is an important word to use because, you can accept something as not true. So it's not about acceptance, okay? Because you can accept something as not true. I accept the fact that there's a Santa Claus, but he's not real, okay? I accept that somebody, but when you affirm something and believe it to be real. So it's a much powerful statement to use. And let me ask a quick question here. And everybody on this planet has asked this question of themselves. What is the most important question that you ask when you're coming to figure out who you are? Right? That question right here, who am I? This is a question that every human on this planet has asked themselves at one point in time. No one's exempt from this question, but it's quite difficult to figure this out for some of us. Who am I? Am I the person that my parents raised me to be? Am I this? Am I that? What is my place in this world? What am I going to do with the rest of my life? It's all this existential question, and I love, Kipling's books. One of my favorites is Jungle Book. And Jungle Book talks about this is someone going to be able to admit people as they come in? So I have that over here on my side, so I don't know if you can be doing that. So Mowgli in Jungle Book was raised by wolves, right? And so at some point, Mowgli realizes that he's different from the other wolves because he's not furry like the other wolves. He doesn't have the fangs like the wolves do. He doesn't walk on all fours like the wolves do, and he knows he's different. So he tries to explore jungle and find other animals, and so he gets on this quest of figuring out, and so some of the animals are like, well, you're a man cub and you can wield fire, and Mowgli's like, well, I don't think I can do that, and then one day finds all the humans in a little village somewhere and says, oh my gosh, there's someone who walks on 2 feet who looks like me. But Mowgli is neither a human nor a cub and trying to figure out what's his place in all of this. Just like this little character right here. We've all seen Toy Story 4. This is little Forky. And Forky is Forky a spoon or a fork? Oh my gosh, what an existential question. Well, I'm both. I'm a spork. But is he garbage or is he a toy? So there's all these questions for Forky, and all the other toys are saying, well, Forky, you're a toy, this little girl loves you. And he's like, no, I belong in the garbage, and constantly tries to throw himself in the garbage until one day he realizes he's more than just a spork, that he means much more to other people. And it's all that pursuit of figuring out, who am I? When you answer who am I, that's what makes you special. That's what makes you unique. Who am I is 4 different components, right? When we're talking about, you know, um, the makeup of who we are. There's number one, the gender marker assigned at birth. Who assigned that for you? Did you have a choice as to what gender marker you could be put on your birth certificate? Did anybody have a choice in that matter? Who decided that for you? Mom, dad? No, actually, a doctor did. And how did the doctor make that determination? A doctor basically looked at the genitals of this baby and said, oh, okay, it's a boy. Oh, it's a girl. Do we do it at birth? Actually, no. Nowadays, we do it with that ultrasound, and we throw these gender reveal parties, and we already decide on the future of our child based on what's in between their legs. Oh, it wasn't a penis. It was actually a finger. So, it was their little hand. It looked like a penis. I have a girl. Okay. Or what if there's something ambiguous there, right? So there's this concept of blue and pink, and we decide the futures of our kids based around these colors. And who actually came up with these ideas of blue and pink? I wish I had the time to tell you because there's a whole story behind blue and pink. But traditionally speaking, pink was more of a male dominated color throughout history, and blue was more of of a feminine and female color. Women in the past did not have positions of power, so they were dressed down in grays and dark blues and clothing that would not lift them. Men, because they had the powers, if they were wearing vibrant colors like pinks and reds and bright blues and purples and lavender and all these, were people of power, people who could afford the silks from the Orient that would make them, powerful. So if somebody saw them wearing that, think about what men were wearing, 200 years ago, when our country was formed, right? What were they wearing? Men were in powdered wigs, wearing powdered faces with lipstick in some cases, and high-heeled shoes and stockings. Were the women dressed this way? No, the men's were very flamboyant. If you saw a man dressed like that today, you'd say it was a drag queen, right? So boy and girl, we are determining our children's futures based on the gender that our doctors assign them at birth. Has anybody ever asked our kids at some point, what gender are you? Well, there's also gender expression. This is how we present our gender to the world. This is what we call gender props and gender cues. So what gender props, are you wearing to, show off whether your femininity or your masculinity? Here in this animated graphic, this is the same animated figure, just dressed differently with different hairstyles. But you can see the difference. And just by looking at them dressed this way, our brains automatically make this assumption that this is a masculine person or this is a feminine person. Some kids may identify somewhere in the middle of all of that. So gender expression is an important way for us to express to the world who we believe ourselves to be. So, it's a fashion statement. Then there's the gender identity, which goes beyond just gender expression. This is the idea of I am a boy, I am male, or I am a girl, I am female. This is a deeper root of who you are. If, this is congruent, we call this person cisgender, right? Where their genitals match what they think about themselves. But if it's different, this person may be gender variant, or what we might say transgender, okay, or gender expansive. But this is the root of our gender identity. And most of us have a sense of this at a very, very, very young age. Think about yourself at the age of 4, and you without your parents knowing, you knew your body was different from other kids, and you had a sense of gender identity in that moment in time. I love the movie The Blue Lagoon. I know it's a super old movie. Maybe none of us has seen it. That's the movie with Brooke Shields and Christopher Atkins. And they were these two kids who were in a shipwreck, stranded on a deserted island, and they had to figure all this stuff out for themselves because they had no parents to tell them. It's a great uh, mythic story on how this all works. But at some point, these kids realize, well, if I have this and I have this and they go together, we can have some fun times. It feels good when you do that. So there was an innie that goes into an outie that went into a little innie, and at some point she started getting stomach pains and she was getting fat, and a baby came, and then they figured out, oh, that's how it happened. Even if they didn't tell us all these things, we would figure these things out for ourselves. And this idea of gender identity is one of those things that is like in our DNA, and somehow we know. And then some people confuse sexual orientation with gender expression, gender identity, because, just because you're born with something in between your legs doesn't necessarily mean you're attracted to somebody with the opposite thing. Think about for yourselves, right? If tonight you went to bed and tonight you had something in between your legs that you knew since birth, and you woke up tomorrow and that magically transformed into something else. So if you went to sleep tonight with, a vajayjay in between your legs, for lack of a better term, and you woke up tomorrow with the opposite, would that change who you're attracted to? Think about that for a moment. Would that change who you are just because you have something different in between your legs the next day? You might think, well, that's kind of weird, and I didn't have that there last night. I need to see a doctor about this, you know. Um, but it doesn't change really who you are and who you're attracted to. So that goes to show you that gender identity is different than sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is all about who am I attracted to, right? So this is a very controversial graphic. I remember DeSantis signing this bill, months ago, and this was behind him on a big board. This is the curriculum we're teaching kids in school. We're not teaching kids this, we're teaching teachers this. So, but, we use this, though, only because this is a tool we've been using since the 1990s to show the difference that I just showed you right here, right? Identity happens here in between your head, right? This is what you think about yourself. Attraction, this is who I'm attracted to. Expression, right? This is my outward appearance. This is how I present to the world. And then there's sex, that gender marker that was assigned to me at birth. These things don't have to be congruent with another, and in many cases, they're different. And in working, many therapists will use this character to get a sense of gender identity from a kid. A cisgender kid would say, my brain says I'm a boy, I've got a pee-pee, and I like to wear boy clothes. Okay? When they're little kids, they can't really tell you who they like. But they're going to tell you, but they're going to tell you based on social cues. Really, that sexual attraction doesn't happen until puberty. That doesn't happen until really they're able to explore that a little further. To them, it's just a concept at that age. So that is not something they're even thinking about really, unless social cues are telling them otherwise. But this is a great little graphic to really help you understand these 4 different components that are very essential in really coming to terms with these things. So LGBTQ, we've heard this term, right? L stands for what? Oh, and we forget, we got to add a plus to it because we also got QQIA, and we also have I, and I think really this community is looking to, commandeer the entire alphabet, so be prepared. But L is what? Lesbian, right? I was once a tomboy, now I'm a full-grown lesbian. I love this little graphic. Not always true, but, this is really how many people see this community, right? So tom girls just grow up to be lesbians. Not really. I know lots of cisgender girls who are heterosexual who are tomboys also. And then G, that stands for what? Gay. I love this picture here. This is Neil Patrick Harris with his husband, and they have a beautiful family, and they, raise their family just like any other family in the world. They have the same sort of problems. They take their kids to school. They help them with their homework. They have to figure out, their schedules, But, it's interesting to see that if we saw a couple like this walking, down the shopping mall hand in hand, would that cause heads to turn? Raise of hands right there. Just show me your hand on the screen if you think that would cause heads to turn in a shopping mall and somebody whisper secrets. Right? Yeah, for sure. Now, if we saw two women holding hand in hand, just show your hand here on the screen. How many think that would turn heads, right? Two women walking hand in hand or arm in arm. Really, that would depend. It's interesting that nobody put their hands up for that. It's interesting how the world sees this, right? So we see two women walking together. Now, it makes a difference if they look different. So if the woman is dressed, more in masculine clothing and she's dressed in more feminine clothing, then that causes heads to turn because that's not the norm, what we like to call the norm. You know what I like to call normal is that we're all different. So what's normal is that we're all different because that's true. If I were to clone you, I would never get another you. I would get somebody that looks like you, but it's not you, it's somebody else, right? Who here is a twin, an identical twin? Is your twin exactly like you? No, it's a different person that's wearing my face. So that's kind of weird, but it is. But that goes to show you how special and unique you are. So we see two gay men. My dad, when I was a little kid, we're talking about here the 1980s, right? So my dad tried to teach. We all have these moments in our as a parent in our kids' lives that we try to create a teachable moment when we see something happening in real life. And we were at a thing that was like a timeshare. So everybody know what a timeshare is where you go sit in a sales queue and you wait for somebody to show you around a property or whatever. And so, many of us do that to get free Disney vacations. Well, we were there to get a free boat. That boat was actually like this big. So we thought in the picture it was actually something beautiful and great. But no, it was just a little tiny thing like this. So, how we were deceived. But we were there, and we were sitting in the queue, and we were sitting with all the other people waiting to sit with a salesman. There was two men walking around arm in arm with each other, and the older man, was just showering kisses on the younger man. And my father, seeing this in there, decided to do a teachable moment, leaned over to me and said to me, "Do you see those two men over there? Well, sometimes, men, they have relationships with each other." And, he's there trying to explain to me what gay men were about. And so this couple actually, because my dad actually pointed to them to point them out to me, these men walked right over to my father and I and the older man said, "This is my son from Italy. I'm so happy to see him here. And he came today so we can look at these." And my father, turning red, was like, "Oops," But that's like, the impressions that we get from seeing people. First impressions make a difference. And it's important to really, come to terms with that we're all different somehow. And sometimes what is right in front of you isn't always what it appears or what it seems. So, gee, that's gay. And then we have this right here. Hold on. Yeah, bye, bye, bye. So, not bye, bye, bye. It's bisexual, but they can't take no more. So, they are coming out that door because they're bye, bye, bye. So, bisexual is what? A college phase or someone who can't make up their mind, decide whether you like boys or girls, right? Bisexual individuals, and this is a whole other workshop that we can teach, but really is this idea of sexual orientation where I'm attracted to both men and women. But there is something that's often confused with bi, and that is this word right here, pansexual. Put your hand in the screen if you've heard this term pansexual before. Okay? So pansexuality, different than pangender. Okay? Very important to note. Just in the same way that sexual orientation and gender identity are different, it is the same difference with pansexuality because pansexuality is who I'm attracted to. So pansexual, and this is the easiest way to explain it, is heart, not parts. I'm attracted to this person. I'm attracted to this person and how they are with me and how they make me feel. It's not about what's in between their legs. It's not about what they're wearing. It's about who they are and what they mean to me. Pansexuality, out of the frying pan, if you will. Why is this term so important to people who are gender nonconforming? Let's look at this picture right here. So here we see right to the left of the picture this beautiful bride and groom, and this was taken at their wedding. Here, these high school sweethearts went to college together, found out they loved each other. They got married, and she married the man of her dreams, and he married the girl of her dreams, and they decided to become parents, and they had children. And 20 years later into their marriage, Husband says to wife, honey, I've been struggling with something this whole time, and I've always felt that I'm a woman. Now, this woman has a choice either to leave her husband because you've been lying to me, because I'm not okay with this, or she has a choice of stick with this person and figure this out. Now, she took a vow and she made a promise to this person till death to us part, and she took her vows very seriously. Okay, honey, let's figure this out. I'm not really sure how I feel about this, but let's figure this out. Well, at some point she came to terms. He transitioned to she, and she's now living her life in this new affirmed gender identity. Now, what happens to her during this process? Does she now become a lesbian because now she's a woman? And how would the world really perceive this? Remember that couple that you saw walking down that I told you that my dad saw walking down, looked like two gay men, and it was actually a father and son? Well, we might assume this couple is a lesbian couple, but she's going to say, I'm not attracted to women, but I'm attracted to this person. This is the person I married. He was a man when I married him, but now she's this beautiful woman. I think she's amazing, and she treats me well, and we have kids together, and we've been raising our children, and we co-parent, and I'm still with this person. Now, who knows what their sex life looks like in the bedroom? That's between them two. They'll figure that out, but for all intents and purposes, people want to put this woman in a box. So they're going to say, then you must be a lesbian now, right? Because she's a woman. Well, no, maybe the term that she would use is pansexual. I'm attracted to this person, not this person's genitals. So a lot of kids today are using this terminology, pansexuality, because gender is just like this bi thing, this bystander thing. It's like, okay, doesn't matter your gender. Okay, I was watching what's this movie, Murders in the Building. Who's seen that show? Great. Selena Gomez surprised me on that show because she was attracted to another woman on that show. Not that it made her a lesbian. She was attracted to this person on the show. So perhaps on that show she identifies as pansexual. But this is a term that we're going to see more and more often, especially when we see people who are under this gender expansive umbrella. So how about this picture right here? I love this. So this is possibly the Q questioning. Well, here's this woman who's involved in this relationship with this boy. See, she's holding hands with this other girl behind his back. Little does he know what's going on behind his back, or maybe he wants to know because he wants to be involved. But this whole process is about questioning. Now, you can question your sexual orientation. You can question your sexual identity. So questioning. So there's two Qs actually, because there's also queer. So Q can also be queer, which is why we add the plus. But one of these things is not like the other. And what is the T? So I love children, and I love how children see the world and how they interpret things. So let's go into the brains of little kids to see how they see gender. And we're going to watch this little clip right here on gender.
Kids have an interesting take on just about anything. They see things in a way that we as adults can't. We have prejudices, we have preconceived notions, we have all sorts of things like that. So I recently sat down with a group of young people to ask them what is the difference between boys and girls. This is something I've actually been wondering about for years. And as you will see here, I got some exceptionally enlightening answers. What's the difference between a boy and a girl?
Well, boys like doing like rough sort of stuff, and girls like doing kind of like kind and soft.
Girls are gentle.
Yeah.
And boys are vicious animals.
Yeah.
The boy has thicker hair than the girl.
Thicker?
Thick.
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes. The boys wear yarmulke.
Look how culture
Boys wear
comes to play
yarmulke,
with this in
right?
religion.
And girls don't.
That's right.
You can tell by the Adam's apple, because if they don't have an Adam's apple, then it's a girl. But if they do, then it's a boy.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Girls like pink, boys don't.
Sometimes boys like pink, sometimes girls don't like pink, right? Yeah.
Girls shop a lot, boys don't.
Sometimes boys shop a lot, though.
Boys like to watch TV a lot, and girls don't.
They don't? I think some girls do.
This is hard.
It's really hard, right? This is really hard.
We could dance around this forever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you and I, yeah.
I know a way, but I think it's really disturbing.
What is disturbing?
You know how you tell a boy pup from a girl pup? You know when people hit their thing in between their legs. You know how they say, "Oh my nuts."
What?
Oh my nuts. They actually mean
Who said this?
I'm just trying to express what the question you asked.
Okay. No, you go ahead. So again, what's the difference between a boy and a girl?
Well, I shouldn't say the disturbing way, but most girls have longer hair than boys.
90%.
Well done. What is the difference between a boy and a girl?
Let me, she was talking about something.
What?
She was saying something in the car that it's a little about potty words but she
Well, tell us then, for sure. What is it?
It was weenus, penis, cupid, stupid.
It was weenus, penis, cupid, stupid?
Yeah.
Is this a song?
No, it's a poem my friend
It's
made
a
up
poem?
when we were finding funny rhymes.
Oh, well, that's a pretty funny one, right? So what's different about boys and girls?
Hair is longer than, and their privates are different.
Ah, we hear it there.
Yeah, they're
Privates are
called
different.
differently. No, penis and vagina.
Finally,
Penis
some
and
honesty.
vagina. That's the difference. Who'd like to be those kids' parents, right? So, very funny. So, yes, penis and vagina. Is that really what defines gender, though? I mean, we were just talking about this, right? So notice how the kids are looking at gender props and gender cues. So they're looking at the length of hair. They're looking on whether or not this person's wearing a yarmulke or not, because, but however, some synagogues are allowing, some of the female rabbis to wear their yarmulkes and such. So, but they're looking at culture, they're looking at religion, they're looking at social cues, they're looking at the clothes they're wearing. Sometimes the difference between gender is just the length of hair. I work a lot of kids' parties, and I was working this one party with this child, and this child was 3 years old, really long, beautiful locks of blonde, curly hair. And as I'm there getting ready to, do my show, because I'm bringing kids music and entertainment, the little boy runs up to me and says, first thing out of his mouth, "Hi, I'm a boy." Hands outstretched just like that. "I'm a boy." And I'm looking to this young boy, and I'm like, "I know your mommy invited me to come and celebrate your birthday party today." But it's interesting that the first thing out of this kid's mouth was, "I'm a boy." Why do you think that was? Well, probably because everybody was misgendering this child because of the hair. Right? And so this kid probably got tired of people misgendering him and started introducing himself with his pronouns just like that. "I'm a boy, so talk to me like a boy." So, and why was this? Why did the parents allow their child to have long, curly locks of blonde hair? Was it because their parents want a little girl? No, absolutely not. Their parents were Jewish in faith, and they practiced a very conservative, a part of their religion where they don't cut the child's hair until they're after 3 in this beautiful ceremony called the Upshrin. And so it was part of the culture for this young child, because it was a coming of age once they cut the baby, the boy's hair, and then later the next thing is the mitzvah and all that fun stuff. So sometimes these cultures do that, but it's really interesting. So what does this all mean, right? What does this all mean? Now, just because you have a penis in between your legs doesn't make you a boy. Just because you have a vagina doesn't make you be a girl either. So, what does it mean, though, if you have a penis between your legs? Well, it means that you're going to provide the sperm for a child. Really the only thing that our private parts tell us about ourselves is the part of the reproductive process we're going to play when it comes time to procreate and have children. That has nothing to do with gender identity. So let's watch this video here real quick about what it means for this young person who's going to school. Now, who's watched the TV show Glee? One of my favorite TV shows. It's no longer on the air. But it's a great show about diversity, about inclusion, and about, this LGBTQ plus community. And here's this one kid who was originally a drag performer in another school, left the school to come to the other school, and they decided to share to the Glee Club captain that it was more than just drag, that they had inside felt that they were a girl, and they wanted to start, affirming that gender identity and dress up, in school as a girl and live in that identity. And so let's see what the Glee captain had to say about all of this.
You okay?
I don't feel right in the men's locker room, but I can't go into the girls'. And I don't feel right in men's clothing, but I can't wear dresses every day. It sucks to never know your place. It's just nice for once to feel like I found one.
Yeah, it is. Well, before I post the cast list, I just need to know that you're ready for this. Because there's going to be a lot of heat on you. And like I said, I can shield you from some of it, but at the end of the day, you're going to be the one out on that stage.
Pay attention to this answer.
Dreams aren't free.
Dreams aren't free. What does that mean, dreams aren't free? It means that this person's dream of living an affirmed gender identity comes at a cost. How many of us here are willing to pay a cost to be who we are? Are you willing to pay a cost? What does that cost mean? That cost could mean getting expelled from school. That cost could mean your parents, the loss of your parents and your family members. Could mean the loss of a job. Could mean the loss of your life. Would you be willing to sacrifice your life to be who you are? Imagine that. Imagine having, a faith in God in the Jewish religion in 1932 in Nazi Germany. Could you practice freely your belief during that time? Who wants to live in that sort of oppression? What a horrible story. And hopefully we'd learn from these stories. But, dreams aren't free. And these kids, given the choice, want to live their affirmed identity because it's one of those things that it's to the core of who they are. Think about identity. Identity goes to the core of your being and who you are, and sometimes our bodies might betray us. Sometimes we may be involved in horrific accidents that might disfigure us or make us lose limbs. Does that make us any less of a person? Do we have to figure new things out for ourselves? Absolutely. So, what is this all about? So we look at this as an umbrella term, right? Transgender umbrella. But the term transgender, this is really an early 21st century term. This term didn't exist in the 20th century up until the late 1990s. There was a book written around this, and in order to put this entire community in one category, we said transgender, but we were using terms like transsexual and transvestite. What does transgender mean? Well, we are going away from this term transgender, although we still use this term, but we want to use more inclusive language like gender nonconforming, because not everybody falls the same sort of path of a transgender person. Sometimes it's about being gender non-binary, sometimes it's so. When we're talking about youth, the term we actually want to use is gender expansive. So we want to talk about a gender expansive umbrella. So I have to get back to you. I don't remember the name of the author, but I know that it was mentioned in the book. It was called Gender Outlaw. Gender Outlaw used that terminology in there. But I'm sure if you Google it, Wikipedia will have some information for you. Google is everything. And just to let you know, back in the 1980s and 90s, we didn't have Google to ask these questions too. So imagine how much in the dark we are. It scares me today in 2022 because I lived through 1980s and Anita Bryant with her attack against the LGBTQ plus community, and I feel like I'm back in the 1980s again. And even after we have all this information available, the problem is there's a lot of bad information also out there on the internet. So be mindful of the information you do find because there is also bad information. Transgender is a general term that applies to a variety of individuals, behaviors, and groups which involve tendencies or behavior that differ from the binary gender identities, male or female, typically, but not always, are assigned at birth, okay, and or the conventional roles that society traditionally has defined, and very importantly, can be someone of any sexual orientation. Now, we say the term transgender, and most of the world think of this image right here. Right here's a graphic of a man standing in front of a bus stop, and there is, on the other side, what looks like a man in a dress who is post-op, and they're both standing in front of the sex change clinic. So most people think that all transgender people want to go have surgeries and have sex changes, and that they're all men who like to wear dresses. This is what the world would have you believe. Now, is this a part of the community? Yes, it is. This is a huge umbrella. But just because we have some people under that umbrella that identify this way doesn't define the whole, right? So if one Latin person, is a deviant, just because you're Latin, does that make you a deviant? No, one person doesn't define the whole, essentially. So yes, Kate Bornstein, she was an amazing person. So, but when we talk about this topic to the world right now, this is still the predominant graphic that people think of. is a man in a dress. And there was this whole issue about, we want to keep these men in dresses out of our women's bathrooms because we want to protect the lives of our little girls because they're going to come and violate them and do, here's a little eye-opener for you. Whether there's a law in place or not, those deviants are still going to make their way into that restroom. They'll find a reason. So unfortunately, it's our job as parents to try to keep our kids as safe as possible, but not by alienating a larger group of people who need that. So think about for a moment, if we created these laws, has anybody seen a trans man before and what the hormone effects does to that person? They look like men. So these are the ones that are going to enter the girls' restroom. So this idea of keeping a man out of the girls' restroom will come to truth when you see a trans man walk in there. So where's the trans man supposed to go now, right? So it's so ludicrous, this idea of bathrooms, and it's really something that, has no merit. Now, a person who dresses, in opposite sex clothing, that's called a transvestite. That was a term we used. However, transvestite's not such a popular term anymore because of the negative connotations that went behind this terminology. But that term transvestite goes back to the 19th century. The end of the 19th century, there was a doctor in Germany called Magnus Hirschfeld who coined that phrase. He was somebody that was known to cross-dress himself, but not because he himself identified as a transvestite, but because he wanted to put himself in the mindset of his patients to understand and empathize with why they had this strong desire to do this. So they may adopt behaviors or practices of the opposite gender to pass in public, but generally they don't want to change their bodies medically. So the term transsexuals came out later in the early 20th century when we started to have these surgical procedures to transform these people. Is this the first time in history that happened? No. There's also in history a Roman emperor, Elagabalus, who offered half of the Roman Empire to the doctor who could medically transition him. So even back in BC times in the Roman Empire, we still had this idea of people feeling trapped in their bodies and wanting to medically or fantastically change themselves. There's a culture in Native American culture of two-spirited individuals. This is someone who embodies both male and female spirits, and they are revered and honored by their tribes and such. So they become the most important people in their tribes because they experience life in a way that no one else can. So transvestite, the term we use now is crossdresser. And who is the most famous crossdresser we know today? We all know the answer to this question, RuPaul. So let me ask you a question and just kind of raise your hand in the screen just like that. How many of you think that RuPaul wants to go have a sex change surgery, take hormones, and become a woman full time? Why? If he goes through all this trouble to look like this beautiful ebony princess there on the left-hand side, why wouldn't he want to go have surgery and all this business of becoming another gender? Well, because RuPaul is a drag queen. And drag queens are performers. They're impersonators. It's a person who likes to dress in opposite sex for, and this is the key term, entertainment purposes, right? So Ru is absolutely fabulous, and so for them it's a job, it's play. It's not so much a gender identity. RuPaul identifies as a cisgender male, gay male who dresses as a drag queen. So let's look at those 4 components I was talking about earlier, right? So the gender marker at birth was assigned male. Gender expression rotates, can be female, can be male, right? So it could be feminine, could be masculine, depends, on the day of week and whether he's got to work, all right? And let's look at sexual orientation, attracted to men, okay? And then let's look at the gender identity. I am a man. I like my penis. I tuck it away when I'm RuPaul. So do you see how now that could go other ways, but this helps open our mind a little bit to the different possibilities that there are. Let's watch this quick little video here, because in this video, what we see is what most of society would see as a beautiful woman. Okay, think of a Victoria's Secret model. So let's take a look at this here and just kind of program your brain to take a look at this and see what you feel about it. Not authority. Yeah. Did anybody have one of those WTF moments watching that video? Right? So, what do we know about this person in that video? I mean, for all intents and purposes, ever been walking down the mall, you see a slender figure like that with long hair, and then they turn around, they've got a full beard, and it's like, what? I thought it was a woman. You know, yes, this person in that video probably identifies, and I think they have been public in saying that they identify as gender queer or androgynous. So this is an individual whose gender experience defies that of the typical gender roles of society. Does not imply any specific form of sexual orientation. So looking at that video, do we know if this a person's attracted to boys or girls? No, until we probably have a conversation with them. This person does not identify with the traditional gender binary. Do we know if this person identifies as a boy or a girl? No, not necessarily. Again, looking at those four components: gender marker at birth, gender, identity, my gender expression, and my sexual orientation. These are all things that you really can't tell just by looking at somebody. And remember, we were talking about you can't judge a book by its cover. But a person like this may consider themselves as gender fluid or gender nonconforming, certainly someone who falls under the gender expansive umbrella. And then we have a new umbrella, the non-binary umbrella, an umbrella term for a person who identifies with or expresses a gender identity that's neither entirely male or entirely female. So under this umbrella, we've got androgynous, gender fluid, agender. This is one who does not identify as a particular gender. I am agender. Asexual means I'm not attracted to a particular partner. This is someone who's probably not interested in intercourse whatsoever. They're into companionship, but not about that. So there's agender, asexual. Know the difference. Gender non-conforming, one whose physical or behavioral characteristics don't correspond to that traditional expectation of gender. And gender queer, one who doesn't identify with a single fixed gender. How many of us here have students who say that they're gender queer? Right? Because there might be. This is a growing population of individuals. And that doesn't mean that they want to change their gender. That doesn't mean that they fall under the transgender umbrella. These are kids who just feel differently and like to wear clothes that they feel comfortable in. It's a whole
Jessica,
different
a lot
experience.
of the counselors that are here today are elementary counselors.
Yeah.
But this information is so important to understand the LGBTQ community, and they might not have heard a lot of these terms. So it's so important for them to have to,
Yeah.
learn about
And let me
this.
tell you, these little kids, most of them know these terms. I have a 9-year-old granddaughter, and not just because she's my granddaughter and learns about these things, but she tells me about all the other kids talking about these things in school. So this is not something that, is foreign to them. They understand that.
Right.
They know about these pronouns, right? So most of us introduce ourselves. If I said to you, "Hi, how are you?" most of us are going to respond, "Fine, how are you?" Right? That's just the call and response that we've been raised to use. Kids today will introduce themselves now with their pronouns. "Hi, I'm Jessica, and I use she, her pronouns. How about you?" And the other kids will respond in kind. So it's interesting. Many of us just think they, them is a bad English. I was raised differently in school. They, them is just bad English. I'm guilty of the same thing, of saying the same thing. I used to say, I'm not comfortable using with they, them because it just doesn't sound right to me. You can't use they, them in the singular sense. It's a plural. Well, in proper grammar, you say the American Dialect Society declared the singular they the 2015 word of the year. Now pick up a modern dictionary and you will find the singular they in that dictionary. So whether you're a fifth grade teacher who likes it or not, they is now a recognized and grammatically correct singular pronoun. So I want to show you this video about pronouns, but I'm running out of time, so I can't really show it to you. But it's an amazing video. But it's about honoring this person's pronouns, and by honoring this person's pronouns, we are actually helping to affirm, their identity. So, I wish I had the time to show you this video, but I won't be able to. So, some may be wondering what the gender neutral pronoun for He-Man is. Would it be they person? So think about it for a moment. But no, here's the bottom line. You had me at your ask of my preferred gender pronoun. Sometimes simply asking the question or even putting it on a name tag that you wear shows that you're a safe space. And that's what's the most important piece of all of this is. Right? Here's this community of individuals who may identify as genderqueer or something other, or who are in the process of figuring these out for themselves. So if we see this person in public, would we say, "Excuse me, sir," or "Excuse me, ma'am"? Raise of hands, "Excuse me, sir." Raise of hands, "Excuse me, ma'am." Raise of hands, "Excuse me." Right? Now, I promise you that sounds like the safe way to go, But I promise you, at some point, your brain has already made this determination on a pronoun to use this person. If you carry on a conversation, at some point, your conversation will vomit out the pronoun that you assume. And you know what happens when you assume? You make an ass out of you and me. How many of us would even consider maybe asking this person? It might be uncomfortable to ask, but once you get that and get that out of the way and affirm this person's gender identity or gender expression for this matter, it makes it so much easier for both you and this person as well. So the best way to do that is usually pay them a compliment first, right? So that's a wonderful tie. I love that tie. I'd love to get one for my dad. Where'd you get that? Well, by the way, I use she, her pronouns. I'd like to be respectful. What can I use for you? You know, so it's great, right? So if we saw this person here, how many of us think this is a little boy? How many of us think this is a little girl? How many of us know who this person is? This person is Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the President of the United States during our World War II, and the person who took us out of the recession. Does that mean that because Roosevelt dressed like this as a child, was Roosevelt transsexual? Oh, that is so controversial. No, actually, this is what little children used to wear back in the late 19th and early 20th century. Every little boy was wearing a little gown that looked like this, roughly because parents wanted to look nice. The hair was long, probably because of the Jewish faith. This is a picture before they were able to cut their hair at the age of 3. And so this was basically, and do you know why little kids wore gowns, whether you were a boy or girl? We didn't really have diapers in the modern sense back then. So it was easier for them to effecate with a gown like this, and they wouldn't soil their pants. And they were usually in light colors like pinks and whites, and because it was easier to bleach afterwards. So it was all because practicality. But today we'd be misgendering Roosevelt, saying this is a beautiful little girl, right? No. And what about this character in mythology, right? Who knows who this is? Cupid, drop back your bow. So there's little Cupid. Raise of hands that if we know that Cupid is a little boy, right? Raise your hand. Is Cupid a boy? Raise of hands. Is Cupid a girl? Okay, so yes. Or maybe is Cupid neither of those things? And actually, Cupid is, for all intensive purposes, and this is my favorite part because we use this character during Valentine's, so there's actually a holiday during the year where we celebrate a gender variant character because Cupid is a hermaphrodite. A hermaphrodite is the modern term for, or an antiquated term for intersex. But Cupid was the offspring of Hermes and Aphrodite. Put the two together, and what do you get? A hermaphrodite. And that is an intersexed individual. This is where biology actually says that you are different. And this person could be born with an extra, chromosome that would be, a person with phenotypic characteristics typical of men and women in variable degrees. So this could be, a penis with an opening for a vagina, or a woman with a testicle, or it could be, and this is more common than you would think. So, I'd love to get deeper into that, but I don't have the time. But know that there is intersex. So there are, there's also a culture in Santo Domingo, I believe it is, the Guaveloches, and these are little girls who were born little girls, right? They have regular looking vaginas and everything, and then during puberty at 12, they develop a penis. So Guaveloche meaning penis at 12. Look it up. It's amazing and it's fascinating. And it shows you that science, that nature, somehow, has these variations. Transsexual, an identity which the person identifies and wants to live as a member of the sex. So this is the most famous transsexual that we know right now. Caitlyn Jenner, love her or hate her.
She was a very important
person in our culture. I'll let you look a quick picture over here.
Very proud of the accomplishment. I don't want to diminish that accomplishment.
So there's Caitlyn. Caitlyn is important because just like Christine Jorgensen was for the 20th century in the 1950s, and if you don't know who Christine Jorgensen is, look her up. She was one of these women who was made a public spectacle as a man who had a sex change operation. Well, after Caitlyn Jenner came out, I always say AC and BC, after Caitlyn, before Caitlyn, because there was a huge community of people who came out after Caitlyn, came out. And so we saw this community have courage to stand out from the shadows. Transgender identities will self-identity. The umbrella includes many overlapping categories, okay? Really quickly, let me share you my story and show you why I'm so passionate, and I'll only show you like 2 minutes of the video. Here you go.
We begin with the amazing story of Jessica Lamb. Born a man, went on to marry, father children, eventually underwent gender reassignment surgery. Let's take a look at part of her story.
When I was little, I used to wish that I could, like, get up and put on a skirt. Like, I was this little boy who wanted to be a girl. Now that I can get up, go grab me a skirt and wear it to work, guess what I'm wearing? A pair of jeans. It's not what the world around me would say was normal, you know? I hate having to say that, normal. And I don't have to, like, go around telling people that. You know why? I shouldn't have to. Just accept me. We'll take care of it.
Technically, pizza's healthy because it's got meat, and if you want, it can have fruits and vegetables.
Like, I'm upset that she took away a father, but in return that she gave me another parent, a better parent for me.
Some of my family did not agree with my decision. You know, they were uncomfortable with it. Some of them are still uncomfortable with it. But they're willing to accept me. Chris, you want to say grace then? And our love is unconditional.
Good evening. You'll meet a number of people tonight in the...
So if you actually want to see that video in its entirety, you can look up, just Google Jessica Lamb. You'll find the YouTube video. My sons were on that video. And incidentally, I did share a story on the Larry King Show of an experience that my boys had in Miami-Dade County public school systems when kids found out that I was transgender. So look up the video so you can get the answer to all that. But it was really, you know, a very trying time when I was coming out in the early 2000s. I came out in the 90s. But you know, to my kids, you know, they were coming out to their friends that I was transgender in the year 2000 before we even called GSAs what they were. My kids had what was a GSA back then, but they called it Children of Divorced Parents because they figured it was a code name so that they didn't paint a target on their group because it was not cool at that time to have like gay friends and people who were transgender and that sort of thing. So, you know, any questions right now before I kind of move a little forward because I'm starting to run out of time. Any questions or thoughts? So I lived this experience, so this is why it's such a passionate subject. So when I say I was doing this since the 1990s, I was really doing this since the 1970s, folks, because it was my life story, you know, and I was scared out of my wits. I was one of those kids in the 1980s. I mentioned Anita Bryant. Maybe some of you have never heard of her or know, you know, what she was to the community back in the 1980s. But I remember being scared for my life if anybody found out that I was transgender. The boys' locker room, oh my God, what a trauma that was for me to just disrobe in front of other boys when I felt my body was different and that I didn't want it. I would secretly shave my legs, and I didn't want any other boy knowing that I would shave my legs because I was a target for bullying. People thought I was gay. My parents thought I was gay. Turns out they're right. Just not the gay they thought I was because I identify as a lesbian woman. That's my sexual orientation. So let's look at those four components for me. My marker at birth was male. My gender expression, depending when you saw me in my life, but my gender expression now is more feminine. And my gender identity is that of a female, and I'm attracted to women. Wow. That's pretty weird, isn't it? That's kind of something different. But see how that gender-bred person helps you understand a little bit more about me and about my journey? It's the same for any person who's experiencing this sort of thing. So any questions before I move on? This is usually the part where I love to do role-playing stuff, but I don't have time, so I'm going to keep moving forward and doing this as quickly as I can. So these are different scenarios that I usually have, you know, during, you know, these workshops, and I usually do this when I'm at the schools and present this, and it's actually very quite powerful where we create some scenarios. So I encourage you to create some scenarios on your own and discuss how to deal with these situations when they happen. What to do when a student comes out. Number one, and first and foremost, is listen. Sometimes they have no one who will listen to them, and you're that one person. And the fact that you took that moment in time to listen, you in that moment could be saving this child's life. Sometimes you don't have to do anything but listen. Be a role model to them. Be the change. Be the example that you want to see. You need to be that. Appreciate their courage. Let them know how amazing it was for them to have the courage to come and talk to you. Most of the time, they're going to come out to you because they think you're a safe space for them. And they look up to you. So when you appreciate their courage, it makes them feel good about themselves. Be mindful of what you say and pay attention to your body language, how you sit in front of them and how you react. If you make like a, you know, if you kind of throw a little like face like that, imagine what that does. let me tell you a story really quickly about me when I was in my early 20s and I was walking down a shopping mall. I was not out as transgender yet. I was in the process of transitioning, so I kind of had my eyebrows done. My hair was a little long, not that long, but I was certainly wearing boy clothes. I'm walking down the mall, and a girl who was handing out little samples of chicken goes to me, "Hey, you're too pretty to be a boy. Come on over here." And I was so embarrassed that she made a comment like that to me. Now, I remember this conversation like if my brain pressed record on a videotape recorder and I can remember this conversation. I say that because do you think if I ever found this girl again that worked in that food court and asked her, "Hey, do you remember when you said that I was too pretty to be a boy?" That girl would be like, "I don't remember you at all." But to me it was so important because it happened to me and I was going through this. And so there was a part of me that was scared, like, "Oh my God." And there's another part of me that's like, "Oh, she actually sees me." But I wasn't ready to be out at that moment. But that moment in time was what's called a marker that helped define who I would later become and how I would deal with the public. So there may come a time that some kid will come out to you or say something to you, and whatever you do in that moment, that's the marker that video recorder presses record in this kid's brain, and they're going to go back to this conversation later in life. You may meet them 20 years later and not remember this conversation at all. I remember having conversations like this with my mother, and she doesn't remember most of it. So be mindful and pay attention to your body language and what you say. So what not to say. These are some of the things not to say, right? So why did you wait so long to tell me, right? They came out to you when they were ready. So whether you had an idea or an inkling of it, this is not validating their experience, okay? But you look so masculine or you look so feminine. Why would you do that to your body? Why would you dress this way? That's, you telling this kid something that they don't feel, right? Or that, "Oh, I already knew this already," because that's patronizing, right? How could you have known? I didn't tell you. I couldn't tell, These are all things I have to tell your parents. The moment you say that, that immediately throws up a force field around these kids, and they may not say a single word after that. It's hard. And, I was here listening to your conversation earlier before I got here, and some of the things that, you can and cannot, say to parents and that sort of thing. But you don't want to tell these kids that I have to tell your parents this, because immediately they're going to shut down, break down, and in some cases have suicidal ideations. So be very mindful and careful about that, because there's, you don't really have to tell their parents unless there is, some absolute danger involved here. This child's going to commit suicide, or they're cutting, or they're doing something, then at that point you proceed with caution, right? But you don't immediately tell these kids, "I have to tell your parents," okay? Or you don't say, "Are you sure? Did you really think about this?" If they're coming out to you and saying something to you, they're sure, because they're sure enough to say something at that moment. Or maybe you're confused, or this is a phase, No, when somebody says something to you, believe it to be real, because they're saying it for a reason. So some of the things that you can say: "Thank you for trusting me," because they found trust in you. Ask open-ended questions. Do you have support at home? Do you know anybody else who is going through this that you can talk to? Open-ended questions. Do you have support, right? Would you like some resources? That's the most important stuff, and I encourage you to find those resources. Safe Schools South Florida, Pride Lines Youth Services, the Yes Institute. You'll see Joseph later. He'll talk about the Yes. There's all these organizations. Here's some resources. So find what's appropriate for you. Give them. Do you feel safe in school? Is there another teacher that's bullying you or saying something? The very first bully that these children usually encounter are their very own parents. And then they feel the same thing from their administration or their school teachers. I care about you no matter what. So no matter what happens here, just know that I care about you and your well-being, and that I support you. Okay, that's important to share. So if you want to take a quick screenshot of this, you can. There you have it, what to do when a student comes out. Listen, be a role model, appreciate their courage, and be mindful of what you say. These are all some things. And here's one of the most important things too, is right here. Provide a safe space. They came out to you because they trust you. It's important to reassure them of that trust by engaging in this moment with respect, dignity, and most importantly, affirmation. Okay? So, there you have it. Be a trans ally. I encourage you to break through those barriers, redefine that binary, that stereotype. Some of the statistics tell us that the prevalence of this is high, right? In a 2016 study, it was 1.4 million identify as transgender. And here in the dark blue, you'll see the highest populations of this community in this graphic. So let me go ahead and bring that up on the screen here for you so you can see it. But here in the dark blue, that's where the majority of this population is. Hasn't changed very much in 2023. In 2022, the numbers will fluctuate from state to state, but they're climbing more than a decade ago. According to the American College of Pediatricians, the percentage of gender dysphoria in this population is about 1%. Think about that in the grand multitude of numbers of the world, and 1% is a huge number. It's a big number. We're not talking like a 0.00. We're talking about a 1%. So 31% of pre-op will commit suicide. 50% will attempt suicide before the age of 20. If you told a parent that your child had a 50% chance of committing suicide because of this ideation, it's mind-blowing for a parent to think. So 1 out of every 2 transgender kids, as simple as that, will have suicidal ideations. And I know, and I'm not really wanting to get into politics here, this is just something that happened when Trump was elected into office, back when he was our president. There was a lot of trans youth who were scared for their rights and for their own lives, and that they were seeing all this legislation that was being, brought out against them, and some legislation that we saw as wins were taken away. And I know personally of 2 trans youth who committed suicide because they feared there was no hope for them in the future. That's too many in my book. And it tears me apart to talk about them because of politics. Imagine now the suicidal ideations of kids hearing these laws saying, you can't talk about this about yourself anymore. We're back in the Stone Ages, is how I feel. And I know this because I went through this in the 1980s. Okay? This is the highest suicide rate above any group. Gladys, do I have a little time to talk about suicidal prevention?
Yes.
Okay, so let me talk a little bit about some suicide prevention stuff here. So, experience matters. Nearly half of transgender and non-binary individuals report they did not receive the mental health care they wanted because their providers were not experienced or even familiar with their needs. So the fact that you're sitting here soaking up whatever information I can offer you right now makes a difference in their lives, because this information is going to educate you to be able to help them. Experience matters. And I promise you, sometime in your life, you will meet some of these gender expansive kids. Pronouns matter to the point of life or death. Transgender and non-binary persons reported having their pronouns respected by all of or most people of their lives had attempted suicide at half the rate of those whose pronouns were disregarded. Again, because you're not affirming them. Okay, so pronouns do matter. Appearing authentically matters. Access to tools such as binders for trans men. This is the things they use to bind their bumpy things on their chest that they don't want. Okay, shapewear, gender-affirming clothing reported lower rates of suicide attempts. Why? Because they're trying to come to terms with their authentic self, and supporting this and affirming this allows them to feel good about themselves and helps prevent these suicidal ideations. Bogus interventions matter. About 70% of transgender and non-binary persons have reported that someone has tried to convince them that they need to change their gender identity. So it means you're wrong. You need to change. We're going to send you to, a camp that's going to help you change your mind because it's a sin, because it's not right. So these interventions that says that they're going to cure them only creates higher rates of suicide. Greater levels of support and acceptance can be directly associated with dramatically lower rates of attempts of suicide. So just by, like I said, picking up the phone and saying hello can save a kid's life. Or just walking into the room and listening can save their life, right? There's lots of these things that we have to worry about. 50% of gender fluid have reported to having to teach not just their medical providers, but their own, professionals that they're around. 19% are refused medical care. High status. Here's, some things. Now, most of these you can find on Glisten. It's a great resource for you. GLSEN. Look that up, and they have some great curriculum around these things. 2% of high school students identify as transgender. 27% feel unsafe. 35% are bullied. 35% attempt suicide. 35 is just too much. Still too much. We have to change these common misconceptions and beliefs by instructing appropriate behavior and teaching respect, by discovering differences, finding ways of creative grouping. So this is one of the most important things I want to bring to you right now is creative grouping, segregating without segregating by gender, right? So avoid the stereotypes. So create an inclusive environment. Instead of dividing groups by gender, try to group in creative ways. What does that mean? So I don't like to say boys here, girls there, right? So GSA do use Glisten as a resource for their clubs. Yes, Glisten is a great resource for these things.
We just don't use them in our schools because of the curriculum.
I get it. No, I completely understand that. I totally get that. So, but if you want a resource to look at these things, that is a great resource to go to. So creative groupings mean is instead of grouping by boys and girls, I like the 1-2 system. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. All the ones here, all the twos there. You can group also by haircuts. Look at your room and look at the hairstyles. There's other ways to creatively group. Think about that. What are some other ways without using gender can I creatively group? PE. How scary is it if you say to boys shirts and skins? Right? Do you really have to do shirts and skins? Would you say the same thing to girls? Would you say to girls shirts and skins, girls? Why would you do that for boys? It's very alienating. And not just because of gender, but maybe because this kid's overweight and feels uncomfortable with their own body. It's very, very, it deals with a lot of body shaming in that moment. So think of ways to creatively group. These things can prevent suicide, okay? Using pinks and blues to represent gender. Use a variety of colors for all genders. I asked my niece one day what her favorite color was, and she said rainbow. All the rainbow's colors. Gender-specific words and descriptors, so use more inclusive gender-neutral words, okay? You can use they, them, as since you can use it in the singular now. You can. Gender-biased terms, you guys, all right, girls. I use those terms, guilty as charged. I use them sometimes, but I always make a disclaimer. But use non-biased terms like you all or all right, everyone, and just try to be inclusive. Even when you're dealing with the group, try to be inclusive in that language, okay? So learn to separate who I am to who I'm attracted to. There's lots of things. Transphobia, if you see this going on, please step in, okay? If you saw a kid being bullied or if you saw a kid being ridiculed, I would hope that you would step in. You wouldn't ask anybody about, whether they're having, what your genitals look like. So, don't ask a trans person if they want surgeries or all these sort of things. Sometimes they'll disclose that information to you. So, just be mindful that transphobia is very relevant right now. We're all striving for equality and breaking free from stereotypes. We all want a safe space and a professional space for us to be in. And we all want to constructively address health issues. This doesn't mean for transgender. This is for everybody, really. And so, respect confidentiality. Don't make assumptions. Use proper pronouns, okay? Don't tolerate anti-trans remarks. Be patient and supportive, okay? Know your limits. Educate yourself. And overall, just, find role models. Use gender-neutral restrooms, okay? Jazz Jennings is a great role model for children. Now she's an adult going to college, learning to be an attorney. It's time to show this gender expansive community that we're here to help and support. So I hope that you would be a trans ally. So I've got less than a minute here. Any questions before I go? You guys have been so attentive. I'm sorry I had to rush through all of this. This is usually like a 3-hour presentation for me, so I can really bring in these concepts. But I hope that just by planting some of the seeds here, that you're able to take that and make those seeds grow. I do encourage you to reach out to different organizations for support, for help. You are sometimes the only ally for these kids, and it's important that you know these things because at some point in time you may be confronted with it. So any questions or thoughts before I go?
I have no.
All right. So thanks everybody for having me here. Joseph, if you're out there, I'm sending you my love. Mwah. Miss you. So thanks everybody for having me. I'm Jessica Lamb. I'll put it again in the chat window. My contact information if you want to reach out for whatever reason, or if you just need somebody to be a role model for a kid, I am here. I've been in part of this community since the 1990s. So, some kids sometimes need a role model as somebody who's lived through this experience. So I'm happy to be that mentor or that role model. So, and if you can't talk to those kids because your hands are tied because of school policy, well, I know a girl that you can talk to, Jessica. So I'm not bound by those same policies. You can send them to me and I'll have a conversation. And sometimes I'm happy, more than happy to talk to a parent also. So I am a resource for parents to talk to. And help them understand what their child might be going through. And most of them look at me, they don't clock me as transgender. They think I'm just a cisgender woman, and so they're open to talking to me. And then later when I tell them I'm transgender, like, you'll never believe the reactions I get. Like, oh my God, but you seem so normal. And I'm like, well, what's normal to you? So, but thanks again. And I hope to hear from you at some point. And good luck. And with all this stuff, all these changes happening, and you have my support no matter what.
Thank you, Jessica. What an amazing presenter every time, your lived experience, all your stories. We appreciate it. I know some of the things, we modify it to what we have currently in our bills. I put some information on the chat, but what an amazing presenter. I look forward to working with you again. I know you've come in the past to other trainings that we've offered through Safe School South Florida. So I just want to thank you for always being there for us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, everyone, we're going to take a 5-minute break.